I'm very happy to have this topic as a first step to bring online community alive. And I recognize most of you on chat. Some of you are French, and it's a pity I have to speak in English, and the other will understand my English, but not very well. So I will try to be to do my best. My topic was what I want to do as a PA president in my presidential address, but I'm very happy to submit for you here. So I start to develop some of the ideas I will present to you here after reading the book edited by Jack Hunter, Greening the Paranormal, and he developed some links between ecology and parapsychology, and he wrote that approaches emerging from the study and of engagement with the supernatural may ultimately help us to reconnect with the natural, and in so doing develop innovative approaches to confronting the eco crisis. And I think it's one of the great challenge of humanity, and as a scientist, as a parapsychologist, we have to face this too. So in the first part of my talk, I will explore several possible overlaps between parapsychology and ecology, because it's the first enigma here. The field of ecology, defined as the study of the relationship between living organisms and their physical environment, is a relatively new area of scientific research. A major concept in ecology is the notion of ecosystems, which are all about relationships between organisms, as well as relationship between living organisms like plants, animals, microbes, fungi, or more, and the non-living environment like water, minerals, gases, sunlight, and so on. And these interactions include the exchange of energy and nutrients through food webs, and everything in an ecosystem is connected through network of reciprocal exchange. And Jane Odom, one of the pioneers of the science of ecology, defined the ecosystem as referring to a unit of biological organization made up of all the organisms in a given area, that is, community, interacting with the physical environment so that a flow of energy leads to characteristic trophic structure and material cycles within the system. So this definition bring to me some link with what parapsychology is working on. I will go on that. And another major concept in ecology is the notion of succession in ecosystem. So succession refers to processes by which living organisms colonize and transform environmental niches to suit their own needs as well as the needs of successive species. One first theoretical link I want to make is the way in parapsychology some models, like the model of pragmatic affirmation of Walter van Lucadou, deals with systems too, and very complex systems. I will use the paper that van Lucadou published in Mindfield in 2019. He used the notion of system and boundary of natural system with the concept of organizational closure introduced by Francisco Varela. And he said that a necessary condition of organizational closure is the self-organization of the system, and a consequence that organizational closure is there is a self-stabilizing property. And in fact, he redefined parapsychology as the investigation of effects in entangled organizational closed system. So this very first definition is to say that we are dealing with systems in parapsychology, and very complex systems which are self-stabilizing, self-organized, and with a network of interaction. And he described 3 laws of this model, and all these laws can be applied to some kind of ecosystems. The first law is to say that paranormal phenomena, psi, are non-local macroscopic entanglement correlation in socio-psychophysical self-organizing organizationally closed system which are induced by the pragmatic information which create the systems. So in parapsychology, we need a theory of what is a system, an ecosystem, and this first law claim is it's both sociological, psychological, and physical. The second law of the MPI, which is well known too, is any attempt to use a non-local correlation as a signal transfer makes the non-local correlation vanish or change the effect in an unpredictable way. It leads to a naturalist explanation of decline effects and the displacement effects in parapsychology, psychology, and therapy research. This important aspect of the MPI is the so-called non-transmission action, NT action, and it assumes that the origin of paranormal phenomena is not signals, but macroscopic entanglement correlation. They cannot be used as a signal transfer or causal influences, and assuming psi would be a time-independent effect like in precognition or backward causation, or if it will lead to real physical effects, this will enable to create an intervention paradox, and the MPI makes the assumption that natures do not allow intervention paradoxes. So in the second law of the MPI, this is an idea that nature is limiting what psi effects can do. And it's something that was formulated also by John Beloff in his historical work. In his conclusion, his claim, it is as if the conservative forces of nature are vigorously striving to restore the status quo following violation of the natural order by psi phenomena. So we can interpret this second law as is psi phenomena show some kind of anti-technological properties which are claimed to be properties of nature by some theorists. The third law is expressed there. It says that macroscopic entanglement correlation are ecologically stable and are limited only by the NT action. They are formed by causal processes which in turn stabilize them, and potential causal links amplify entanglement. So the second law did not maintain that this macroscopic entanglement correlation need to be weak or unstable. In general, it is difficult, in fact, to isolate them experimentally, but they are powerful component of nature, as claimed Lucado. So the third law is like saying that we need something like a causal relationship too, and is saying too that we are dealing with ecologically stable system, which means that they are self-organizing, organizational closed system in a steady state with its environment. So it's really like if in parapsychology we can learn a lot about the study of ecosystem. And the potential causal links are causal processes which are not actualized but could potentially play a role in the organizationally closed system. So this kind of ecological property are very interesting, and this is just a first shoot on that. I will bring to your attention so other kind of intersection between ecology and parapsychology, and then I will go deeper in one work, the work of Bertrand Meus, who is an author dealing precisely with that topic. The most obvious one is the intersection between different types of exceptional experiences and what we call ecological consciousness. It is like an after effect of these experiences, like psychedelics, near-death, or abduction experiences. But it's the way one experiencer comes away from their encounter, from their experience, with an enhanced sense of connection to the environment and the world around them. And that was shown by several authors, but I will let my colleagues, Jack Hunter and David Luke, and the others describe some studies of this rising ecological consciousness, which show another promising aspect of these experiences. Another intersection is the naturalist approach, in psi research, what the French metaphysicist Bertrand Meuse called the ecology of the psi subject, and studying psi in its natural environment, particularly when it is recurrent, is best done in a way similar to a biological naturalism. And Brody praised this model of psychic naturalism for a better understanding of the nature of psychic functioning, better than controlled parapsychological laboratory experiments. In a sense, the psychic naturalism examines the function of psi in its greater ecology, and some of the work on that side are done by Rupert Sheldrake, who use a lot of naturalist observation to develop ecology-valid experimental psi research with animals and humans, like dogs that know when their owners come home, mothers that know when their baby need milk, paranoiacs that know when they are being starved at, and people that know who are spamming their email boxes. So why ecology is not better incorporated into parapsychology? Individually, parapsychologists have developed pro-environmental behavior and beliefs, but as a scientific discipline, it has done almost nothing to engage itself in the struggle to preserve life on Earth. This looks out of the scope of the natural scientific work. Such a stance looks weird when some of the best scientists of the planet are now environmental activists. So do we have to stay neutral, or do we have to become activists in ecology aspect? Nevertheless, links between ecology and parapsychology were already made by several authors influenced by philosophy, spirituality, and anthropology, with approaches like Joseph Killang, extrasensory ecology, Warwick Fox, transpersonal ecology, Paul Devreux, revisioning of the Earth, and Mark Schroll, transpersonal ecosophy. But before that, we should not forget that vitalism was a major topic from some older parapsychologists, like Hans Riesch and Gustave Gelée. Michael Nam will speak about them. Vitalism is a philosophical tradition for which living beings are not reducible to physico-chemical laws. It sees life as matter animated by a vital principle or forces, which for living beings would act to the law of matter and breathe life into matter. Older parapsychologists saw a kind of spiritual vital force behind some complex psi phenomena like ectoplasm. One example is the work of the French physician Gustave Gelée, who was a vocal defender of supernormal physiology based on his studies of ectoplasm and clairvoyance, while ideodynamism refers to a process of physiological realization of an idea, such as hypnotic suggestion. Ideoplasty extends this process to matter itself. The idea is no longer a dependency, a product of matter, but on the contrary, it models it, gives it its form and its attributes. The specificity of Gelé's metapsychic approach is that it attempts to interpret ectoplasm as emanation of not from afterlife, but from life itself, according to an option that is more vitalist than properly spiritist. The object of his work is therefore to build a theory of evolution which integrates and at the same time supports the existence of ectoplasmic materialization. And from the element in his possession, Gelée will try to establish a rational parallel between what happens during ectoplasmic embryogenesis and during metamorphosis in some, for instance, a closed chrysalis of the insect. And his theory is very similar to that of Bergson, who criticized the static opposition between spirit and matter to present them as two processes of opposite senses. He say that we must think about materialization process and spiritualization process, and the spiritualization of matter was described by both Gelée and Bergson. Another kind of intersection is the ethological observation of the collective intelligence of social animals, which inspired several parapsychologists, which further an holistic view of mind, the view called polyzoism, with telepathy as the missing link. And there was the work of William Mackenzie, Renaud Evrard, Rémi Chauvin, which deal with their work on telepathy, on long distance and group telepathy from Renaud Evrard to elaborate a new theory of psychic space-time, new laws of physics that allow this kind of phenomena. Evrard imagines that human beings are not different from these social animals, and that there is therefore a polypsychism linking thinking beings between them. He defines it as the existence of a collective subconsciousness where the osmosis of personalities is frequent. And on the basis of experimental study on animal psi, PK with animals, Rémi Chauvin also claimed that the transformism of species was not immune to psychokinesis, which directed mutation with much more relevance than blind genetic accidents. And parapsychological data highlight at each level, from cell to crowds, a coalition for existence in opposition to the Darwinian struggle for existence. Another kind of work that we can connect to that question is the more recent Global Consciousness Project, which was developed as a holistic experimental approach of psi, collaboration of researchers recording the effects of mass consciousness in response to major global events. And recently, Roger Nelson published a book about that. And this suggests a large perspective similar to Teilhard de Chardin noosphere or Lovelock Gaia hypothesis. Should we finally consider psi in its terrestrial ecosystem? Unfortunately, the GCP has been discussed as a possible psi experimental effect, and in fact, it's very difficult to remove experimental effects in this kind of research. And this question allow us to objectify, to object to this kind of research that may show more a law of psi phenomena, like a paradoxes that we can only prove what we have in mind, and some serious epistemological and methodological problems are triggered by this kind of research, which have only rarely been considered beyond this field. But recently, Thomas Rameron has published a paper showing that experimental effect may be an explanation of results outside parapsychology too. But as suggests Jack Hunter, we should not examine parallels between ecology and parapsychology just for the sake of exploring interesting intersection, but, as he said, for the essential task of contributing towards a much broader necessary change of perspective concerning our relationship to the living planet. And one way to discuss that is to analyze how ontological assumptions underlying the rejection of the so-called paranormal by mainstream materialist science and culture are precisely the same as those that underlie the ecological crisis and our society's fractured relationship with the earth. We will build on this assumption to show why parapsychology and ecology can join forces. And my talk can move to the second part, but I think I will be short because there's too much to say. So you have to know that it's a paper that may be published in the Journal of the Study of Religious Experiences. It is all about the work done by the retired professor of philosophy Bertrand Meres, a major French author in both area of ufology, parapsychology, but who also published essays in political ecology since 2009. And his intellectual itinerary straddles the study of religious experiences and ecology. He is a specialist of the epistemology of the taboos of knowledge, and religion scholar Jeffrey Kripal made Meres an author of the impossible alongside Frederick Myers, Charles Fort, and Jacques Vallée. Bertrand Meillas is now a member of the Institut Métapsychique International, and his primary interest was in philosophy of nature as opposed to philosophy of the city, with the idea that we could understand man only if we replace him in cosmic reality. And as a keen observer of humans on their institution, but also close to nature in his childhood, his intellectual journey led him from the study of anomalous experiences in ufology and parapsychology to ecology. So I will be very brief on that, but he earned his reputation through his original works in ufology, drawing on a particular rich corpus. He identified parallels between reported observation of flying saucer and encounters with extraterrestrial and story published in the science fiction literature before 1947. That is before certain cultural and scientific aspects of ufology arrived in the form we know them today. And his study addresses several reductionist and non-reductionist hypotheses in an attempt to explain this coincidence between science fiction and the other observation, while acknowledging that it does not fully achieve it. And the book keeps the riddle open. Myths have both a cultural and a natural facet. Following this foray into territory combining philosophy, ethnology, and folklore, Meillas patiently built another object of study, the history of animal magnetism, hypnosis, and psychical research. And he has emphasized the conflicts between the view of man on the world, pitting the proponent of the marvelous phenomena of the human psyche against their detractor. He also finds it symptomatic that the violence of these epistemic conflicts was expunged from its official reenactment, like a prelude to its evacuation from debates when academics became more and more policed. So he developed a very well-documented work on the controversy of the 19th and 20th century, and the successive and approximative verdicts which dismiss these paranormal phenomena were supported by the dominant Western worldview and promulgated in the condition of relatively unbalanced ideological and institutional competition. And thus the question of the reality of animal magnetism phenomena divide at some time the elites, in particular the French Academy of Medicine, and before being officially dismissed. And systematically, Meillas dissect the discourse of the victors who came to disfigure the history of these currents, and in doing so, he reopened the issue and awakened the whole controversy, creating numerous hostility with his contemporaries. So I was very brief about all his animalistic work. There's a lot to say, but I want to shift on the other work who are less known by parapsychologists, because Meillas' first essay on political ecology was published in 2009 and is entitled La politique de l'oxymore, comment ceux qui nous gouvernent nous masquent la réalité du monde. So the politics of the oxymoron, all those who govern us mask the reality of the world. And he was focusing on the notion of oxymoron, which is a figure of speech, which consists in combining two words with contradictory meanings. And in the political field, expressions such as sustainable development, resilient agriculture, etc., have come to paralyze potential opposition and block through flow. And rather than denying the major challenge of the ecological crisis, some part of the political world thus puts up an even more powerful defense: the idea of possible compatibility between the current functioning of the society and the protection of the biosphere. And alongside his political criticism, Meillas invites us to reflect on the internal regulatory processes that allow a social system to persevere in its being. And using several examples, it shows that the change of or metamorphosis, which some people are hoping for, only ever occurs when the system becomes so saturated that external forces force it to change. This is a form of methodical pessimism, which states and observes that no mental universe ever gives up on its own. It is always preferred to try to reframe in a diluted and harmless form the anomaly which destabilizes it, hence the privileged use of the oxymoron. And from the beginning of the book, the author draws on his work on the history of mesmerism. This work shows that the sulfurous animal magnetism, which was thought and even officially banned, suddenly returned in a watered-down form under the name of hypnotism. So there's a move at the end of the 19th century between what was banned as magnetism and then come back as hypnotism, like it is acceptable now by the dominant paradigm of the science of the mind. In the same way, claimed Bertrand Meres, ecology was abruptly restored by a capitalist and financial system which had first crushed it with its content. And the difference between these two cases is one of urgency. If we want to, say the Meres, we can live without paranormal phenomena, but we cannot continue the current flight forward without perishing. Another aspect described by Meres is that mesmerists were precursors of ecology. He mentioned that the proponents of mesmerism are also sometimes the precursor of ecology, and that there is a deep affinity between the ecology of the spirit sketched by the theorists of mesmerism and of ecology in the sense that we understand it today. In particular, he identifies the utopian socialist movement, which has drawn its source from esotericism, mysticism, mesmerism, and certain currents of Christianity, but also the paradigm of the cosmic solidarity, which, in a rejection of the mechanistic vision, offer a vision of the world close to the German nature philosophy, according to which everything in the world is connected. This new view of the universe notably influenced the political thinking of Jean Jaurès, a great French politician, a socialist politician, who concluded in his own philosophical thesis with the grandiose view of universal entanglement revealed by progress in the psychical science. There is a book by Bertrand Meres on Jean Jaurès, which is not yet published, but which deal on the metapsychic views of Jean Jaurès and their political implication. In the afterword of the second edition of the book on the politics of the oxymoron, Meres combines his historical research on his ecological question around the general question of how societies succeed in managing events, change new knowledge and practice that seem to compromise their economy in the very general sense of the term. So mesmerism in that chapter is assimilated with an epistemological aggression, opening a 150 years of conflict, whose challenge was none other than to redefine the structure of the human personality form for the times to come. And this is an essential point in Meres' theory. There is a plasticity of the psyche, which allow man to constantly recreate himself and the image that man has of himself, thus has concrete consequence for reality. So I think my time is very short, so I will not do all the talk I have prepared to, but I will say some aspect. That was the first book by Meres. After that, he did with other, and deeply he go in the connection between the aspect of ecology, the history of psychical research, what we know from current parapsychology, and he bring along a lot of concepts about how parapsychology and the history of parapsychology is a way that enables us to describe how the society can change change and resist, or made false change too. And he finally concluded with some books that one of the most important dimensions was one of the sacred as a perennial and founding dimension of human experiences, which is irreducible to religion, often come when times of collective effervescence play a crucial role to develop real evolution. And what he was saying in the final way is maybe there is a part to play to psi phenomena in the way we can change the mentalities about what to do collectively with the ecolo crisis. And he applied that, he built that on the basis of a reading of most of the best sociologists we have in the West, like Emil Durkheim, Max Weber, and other like Serge Moscovici, saying that sometimes when we see revolution in some places, we see also carrier of charisma, so some exceptional characters as source of social innovation, who have some powers, some psi abilities, which develop a kind of sacred stuff around them, and close to close transmutes all values and breaks all inherited rules and norms. And another book that is a forward of everything I said before is when Bertrand Mears come back to metapsychics with his book on Jesus, described as a thaumaturgist. And he developed a very deep study of all the miracle attribute to Jesus, but also to the way we can describe Jesus as a carrier of charisma that changed the world. And he applied some very new stuff, like the theory of the trickster, that makes individual and paranormal experience as the source of social innovation. But the trickster said that the people who do this kind of mutation, revolution, fit with certain mythological aspects of not. There are not some people who are only, I can say, clean and very positive. They are kind of anti-structural people. And he said that Jesus was a typical incarnation of the figure of a trickster, the anti-structure par excellence, per se, and that the Jesus event was a textbook cases of all the paranormal and the trickster can be applied to the society and to the revolution in society. So there is plenty of things to say about that, but I will be very short. And there is the essay on John Jaurès, but I'm very slow. So I come to my conclusion and then opening to the discussion. What are the key points that we can sum from Bertrand Mears' work are this kind of intersection. The notion of ecosystem, which is central to ecology, can be extended to the cosmic level, because parapsychology will demonstrate the possibility of non-local entanglement between all living systems and their physical environments. Ecology can be integrated into parapsychology, as parapsychology is already a transdisciplinary science, but parapsychology also suggests that ecology must integrate non-local entanglements into its field of observation and theorization. And psi can be understood as a singularity, an area of subversion of the usual laws, revealing the existence of laws other than those which govern material interaction alone. Another conclusion is that the favorable context for psi is the anti-structural characteristics described by the trickster theory of George Hansen. This can be seen both at the level of group dynamics, like biotope, and among the bearers of charisma. Another conclusion is that psi should not be understood as a stable and reliable signal that makes a system powerful, but as an unstable and elusive process that promotes the transformation of the system and the system with which it communes. It is a definition which corresponds to the one of pragmatic information in Walter von Nukenhu's model. There is other kind of aspect, but I'm not sure I can develop on that because I have not described all the arguments. But the final one is the idea that across his entire corpus, Mears established a new rapprochement between ecology and animalistic. It revolves around a socio-metamorphosis which combines political sociology and parapsychology. From past examples, Mears anticipates the return of a myth that would activate and even allow rebellion against inaction in the face of the ecological crisis. This myth is the one of cosmic solidarity, which combines the facts of ecology and parapsychology and offers an alternative version of the usual myths, which generally produce transcendent heteronomies. The usual myths are speaking about God, spirit, or supernatural, but the myth of cosmic solidarity that we can sum as the sentence, everything is connected in the world, refers to an immanence. As the paranormal is not the same as the supernatural, it is intrinsic to the living. And affirming that, claiming that, it is to say that living beings, individually and collectively, can transform their world. While humanity's greatest challenge is the current ecological crisis, parapsychology may contribute to the expected changes of behavior by changing the way we think about our place in the cosmos. So thank you for your attention, and I will be able to respond to some of your questions, I think. And my article on which I rely has been submitted to the Journal of the Study of Reduced Experiences because Jack Hunter is editing a special issue on reduced experience on ecology.